This is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous, good-looking friends. If you haven't heard by now, the Department of Homeland Security has submitted redacted information to the court, which is now publicly viewable. As we've discussed before, we all anticipated heavy redactions, and unsurprisingly, that's exactly what happened. I think it's safe to say none of us are shocked, but I believe many of us are frustrated and annoyed, given how this situation is being handled. One major misconception floating around is that Prince Harry is behind the delays and redactions. Let's clear this up again. He isn't. The lawsuit pits the Heritage Foundation against DHS, not Harry directly. But with that said, he's not entirely uninvolved. Through his lawyer, David Sherborne, Harry has entered the fray, and we know this because I previously shared DHS's log showing Sherborne requesting calendar time and exchanging emails with DHS, something he'd have no reason to do unless something fishy was afoot. Having followed this case closely for 2 years, the core issue remains: would disclosing whether Harry lied about his drug use on his visa application harm him or invade his privacy? DHS argues that his privacy trumps public interest and that revealing this could endanger his safety. And DHS has been consistent for the past 2 years using privacy as their main argument, stating that Harry's privacy outweighs the public's interests, being the arguments that the Heritage Foundation had put forward were not strong enough to deem exposure of Harry's information. Now, on the flip side, Heritage Foundation's position, which I think many of us have been missing, boils down to two possibilities. Did Harry lie about his drug use, checking no on the form? If so, he should face legal consequences and deportation. Now, on the other side of the coin that they're making is that, or did he admit to drug use and the U.S. government gave him special treatment, fast-tracking a waiver that typically takes months? Either way, it points to a cover-up involving the U.S. government as well as the U.K. government. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Megxit was a lie. It's looking more and more like Harry is on an A1 visa, reserved for diplomats and heads of state, not an O1 for extraordinary ability. This whole fight over his status seems more about protecting Meghan than anything else. As an American, Meghan doesn't need a visa to live in the U.S., but she might rely on International Protected Person Status, IPP, to shield her from prosecution, taxes, or civil testimony, benefits that also safeguard the crown. So now if we go back in time, Harry retained his A1 status when he arrived in the U.S. because the Queen granted this couple a year to test the waters. There's no record of her stripping his passport or royal status with the UK government and communicated to our government. The fact that American taxpayers, particularly New Yorkers like myself, funded their security in 2021 screams A1 visa head of state territory. Don't be fooled by Daily Mail headlines or Kinsey Schofield's recent spin about Harry being on an O1, possibly backed by a foundation vouching for his extraordinary talent. Maybe in the subsequent years afterwards, Invictus probably stepped up, or Johnny Mercer probably wrote some letter. But in the very beginning, Harry came over here with his status intact. And even if we were to go with this O1 visa, the narrative doesn't align with Megxit's timeline. Even an O1 takes time to process, and Harry and Meghan's claim of fleeing Canada for California overnight due to the paparazzi pressure falls completely apart. They were already in California by January 2020, and I've shown you that. The only way their move was so seamless is if Harry already held an A1 visa, likely well before the Megxit charade. And when you look at it from the American perspective, Meghan wouldn't have needed to get any type of visa, but she definitely would have wanted to have that IPP status back so she can go off and do whatever nefarious deals that she had been doing. This is why they have been pushing so hard to get this status back. It's not for him, it's for Meghan. Okay, another myth that we must debunk, or a misconception, is that the UK doesn't issue US visas. It's the United States that issues the visa. A high-ranking UK official, possibly someone in UK government or someone from the royal household like Fiona McElwim, who was hired in September 2019 by the Sussexes with diplomatic experience, would have coordinated with the US government. Common sense tells us royal security logistics don't happen overnight. The idea that Harry and Meghan fled in the dead of night without anyone knowing is laughable. The extensive redactions and efforts to shield Harry suggest a bigger goal. And I think it's avoiding diplomatic fallout for the UK. Keeping him on an A1 visa was likely a convenience to dodge scrutiny of the crown and limit financial liability. An O1, by contrast, requires proving extraordinary value to the United States. I would imagine that in this case, Harry would have had to have provided financial statements showing all this value and worth that he was bringing to the United States. I mean, can you imagine a royal hashing out their worth in those terms? I don't think so. You see, the A1 was the path of least resistance, and if the Queen in her mind thought that they would be back in a year after helping the Biden campaign, then there was no need to go ahead and open up a can of worms, exposing the finances to the crown. In any case, if our government records list him as A1, he's still head of state on paper, regardless of what the media or palace says. Like, the government records would be the end-all be-all at this point. Forget about what the media has been saying. We know that the media lies, and we also know the palace lies. Just look at how they buried Meghan's fake pregnancy rumors in 2019. If you were around, people were being silenced on social media, especially with Facebook. And we know that the palace was communicating with Facebook during that time because Nick Clegg, who is directly connected to James Holt, was the one who was behind the content moderation and global policies. We know this from the Twitter files. Combine that with James Holt working for Nick Clegg prior to joining the royal family, put two and two together, it doesn't take a genius to figure out what was going on back then. There's a lot of things that the palace covers up. I mean, we saw this with the abuse of the staff. We still really don't know the full extent of damage that Meghan has caused because she had been protected. Now, when you look at this situation overall, it's all about protecting the crown, even if it means propping up this mess. So from the UK standpoint, they're going to do whatever they need to do to protect themselves as well as the United States because they had been hand in hand in collusion with allowing this fool to come over here to do what he has been doing. And yesterday, the Caribbean prince, who has been with Megxit from the very beginning, has leaked information that Prince Harry is on an A1 head of state visa. Now, I would tend to believe this user because he has a track record of giving us tea before it gets spilled. And in this case, I believe this because when you add everything else up, as well as the United States taxpayer has been paying his security, well, at least I know for a fact that in 2021, New Yorkers paid for his security, so obviously he has some special status. But in addition, there are redacted documents covering up huge UK-related issues. Now, I mean, if you've been paying attention and have been on this channel for the past 3 years, and then also part of the other channel that I had that had been talking about this from the very beginning, of what Harry and Meghan's mission were when they came over here and why he needed to be deported ASAP was because he had been meddling with our government and subverting the U.S. Constitution by funding groups that were pushing censorship. Harry and Meghan came over to the United States not because of Megxit. That was a lie. They came over here to interfere with the United States elections. Now, they might not like the word interfere. They went to go support the Biden campaign, and that is a fact. They were behind supporting with the social media companies in suppressing conservative voices. Harry was around Aspen Institute when they suppressed the Hunter Biden laptop story. So, make what you want of it, but in 2024, the UK CCDH had been involved with trying to meddle with our election again. So it's not just 2024 that the UK had been involved. In 2020, Harry was over here being a part of that. And that's a fact. In addition, we don't question why he knew about January 6th, especially when he said at the time that he wasn't on social media. How would he know? Oh, it's because he'd been hanging around the same people who had been inciting and gaslighting and setting this all up for the so-called insurrection. Now, in my opinion, I do believe that the Heritage Foundation could have made a better argument. With DHS positioning Harry's privacy outweighing the public's interest, yeah, it actually does when you think about it. Because how is it, Harry, whether it be he lied or not, affecting your daily life? It doesn't. But if we look at it from the perspective of him coming over here and being involved with our government and subverting our Constitution, as well as interfering with our elections and him being under the influence, you betcha, the public interest supersedes this idiot's privacy. You betcha it does, because he's attacking our country. We have a foreign adversary on U.S. soil trying to subvert our U.S. Constitution, who should never have been here in the first place, especially if he lied on his application or if he was given special treatment. Now, that is the argument that I think the Heritage Foundation needs to inject now. All of a sudden now, Niall Gardner is interested because Ashley Biden gets called out. Where were you when all of us were screaming about this guy meddling with trying to take away our civil rights? When you look at the Heritage Foundation, their whole premise is to defend the Constitution. So why are they not picking up on this fact? Isn't it bizarre that Niall Gardner is the one who's the mouthpiece for, trying to push and get this case through when it wasn't even him that submitted it? It was Mike Howell. And I apologize for expressing my frustration here with everybody, but the mainstream media continues to peddle Harry and Meghan's garbage. They continue to not question or even put common sense together in stories that they themselves have done that are completely contradicting. You know what I mean? And, you see these so-called journalists talk about this stuff, and, it really is frustrating because the bigger story is this stuff that you see on your screen. Everything that we have been told has been a lie. And the fact that we have media outlets continuing to push the propaganda into suckering the public just to make sure that this whole thing doesn't blow up, to me is fascinating to watch. There's so many content creators that could be talking about this stuff, but they don't. And the question is, why? Is it more because they know that they're going to get clicks by going along with this facade and sham of a marriage and give the so-called gossipy stuff because that's what people want to hear versus what they should be knowing about this? Why continue to lie to people's faces when you know deep down inside that this stuff is not true, that they are peddling? Why? And to me, I find that in itself is a disservice to getting to the truth and holding these two eventually accountable. If we all don't start working together in uncovering the truth to all of this from behind the scenes, I can't be the only one that's doing it. But many of you that are watching this know that these are facts. These are facts of their involvement and ties to the various organizations as responsible for the destruction of this society. How much more can I bring to the table here on this? And this is the problem that we have here. Like, I can't go into talking about, how bad Meghan is as a mom, and Harry and Meghan are about to get divorced, and Meghan looks so terrible. Like, I can't continue to keep talking about this woman's looks or Harry's balding head because none of that stuff matters. That's the stuff that they want to keep you distracted with. And everything about this woman that we're calling Meghan Markle has been a lie, including all the supporting characters in this saga. And if I look at this with the glass half filled, because I was having this conversation with the Duchess of Sussex yesterday, is that maybe, just maybe, this was purposeful because we know in a couple of weeks, Harry's going to be appealing this UK decision on his security. Let's say there was information given on this that Harry could then now turn and use and say, you see, now my security and safety is at risk because this information has been let out into the public. Wouldn't you hate to know that having this unredacted form or unredacted information caused Harry to get his security back? So you know what? Maybe it's a good thing we didn't see anything because we don't want to give any more to help this guy's case. Because I'll tell you this right now, if these two get their so-called status back, especially Meghan, then forget it. We're all in trouble, because no doubt that these two will abuse that status to come after all of us who speak out against them. Now, I'd like to leave everybody on this happy and positive note. The only other explanation for why these documents have been so heavily redacted is that just maybe, possibly, based off of the exemption that they filed, maybe Harry is under some sort of investigation with the federal government. That too could be a very real possibility, especially as it's now coming to light, even though I had showed everybody this over the past couple of years, of Harry and Meghan's involvement with the Bidens as well as the US government and all these censorship arms. So maybe, just maybe, that might be something to all of this. But, we won't know, because there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that none of us know as to what's happening. And I don't doubt that King Charles is going to do everything that he possibly can to protect the crown and the liability that potentially the UK as well as the institution could face if indeed somehow they are connected to all of this as a result of being on board with this one world government and preventing Trump from getting in to foil their plans. I mean, many of you are watching how all of this is unfolding and how angry and upset the EU and the UK are. We don't want to be funding any more wars, and we all know that these people in Europe all want it, especially the World Economic Forum. And we know that Harry enjoys the war because it keeps his Invictus games going and money churning. So I'll leave you there on that. I'd love to know what you guys think. Definitely leave your thoughts below. As always, I will be back with more content, but until then, please be safe, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!
I was such a fraud.